There is no other way to do it. Books don't write themselves. There is a special place in hell for people who set meetings over lunchtime. All you've got to worry about is what are you going to do the next time you sit down to write. But what separates, good writers from other writers is
activate your energy.
Welcome to the Activated Authors Podcast, a show where we distill the core principles of what it takes to become a happy, healthy, and productive author, no matter what stage of the journey you're at. I'm your host, Daniel Willcocks. I'm an international best-selling author, as well as an author coach, speaker, and creative entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a lifelong student of all things productivity, psychology, and human behaviour. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. Without further ado, let's dive in. What is up, Activators? And welcome back to another episode of the Activated Authors Podcast. My name is Daniel Willcocks, and here with me every single week is
Sam Frost. Hello.
And I definitely did not just forget the entire intro and stop halfway through, which is not the reason why Sam is laughing. Dear God, what a week. How are you, Sam?
Oh, I am about to yawn. Oh my God. No.
You scared yourself off of it.
Yeah, it went back up.
Which is worse, when a yawn escapes or when a sneeze escapes?
Sneeze.
There we go.
Because you've just said yawn and it's come back. I'm good, actually. I'm feeling good this week. I'm feeling good. So it's Thursday today. I've been feeling good since Tuesday. I had what can only be described as a full-on existential crisis meltdown on Monday, which was the first day that I started to kind of feel human again. I'm still a bit like bunged up. Sounds very northern. But yeah, I'm good now, thanks to your kind self talking me down off the ledge on Monday. But yeah, it was one of those moments where it's the lesson will be repeated until it's learnt thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I get kind of almost caught up in what other people are doing and either forget to do my thing or think that my thing's wrong because it's not their thing.
Mm-hmm.
So as I had a bit of one of those, and by a bit I mean a lot. It was bad. I quite literally me and Dan had our meeting and then I just broke like a dam and cried so hard and then fell asleep for a bit. So that happened.
Do you know what's interesting about that is, for me, that does not feel like that happened this week.
I know.
It does feel like a 3 week ago thing. Dear man.
I know. But yeah, no, I'm good. I'm feeling a lot more kind of settled in myself. For now. How are you, Dan?
It's been a week.
Mm-hmm.
I have been productive in the things that I need to be productive in. I have exceeded the stuff that I normally do and actually got to some of the things that have been lingering on my plate for a long time, and I'm feeling much better about now. Because as listeners to this show know, as you know yourself, because we have lots of conversation about this, I'm doing a lot of simplifying things to make stuff obviously easier for myself, but easier for other people for whom my services are intended. Mm-hmm. Just because all round, I know, speaking for myself, I've done a lot of stuff in the past where I get really excited on ideas and I come up with all these different ways of doing stuff, and things get complicated very, very quickly. Mm-hmm. So I am succeeding in spending a lot of time at the minute boiling stuff down and making things simpler. But it's been a hard week, honestly, personally, for a number of reasons, which I likely won't dive into. But as an example, yesterday, so I'm on a bit of a deadline with ghostwriting at the minute. I'm on sort of 4,000 word days as standard. Yeah. And then yesterday I hit 1,000 words and then just none of me felt right. And I believe that I'm probably on the edges of burnout. And so I'm being very, very careful there. And so I got to a point in which I recognized that nothing else really was going to productively happen without hurting myself yesterday. And so I stepped away from the computer. I went for a run. I had a cold bath because it's been so hot here. Luckily it's cooled down today somewhat. But I took that time, despite the words that need to get done, and I'll make them up. There was just no way that was going to happen without me hurting myself. And so I stopped. And also, and I'll say this is kind of like an exclusive for this podcast, I was in the running to give a TED talk or TEDx talk later on this year, to which I was like thrilled by the opportunity and like put a lot of work and stuff into it. And I have, as of this year, or as of this week, also deferred on that opportunity because I'm currently in a position in which I've got lots of transitionary stuff happening with my business, with my personal life, and lots of things. And I have such a huge amount of respect for TEDx and TED and everything that goes on. Like, so much of what I've learned and the things that have helped me get to where I am have come from those talks from people. Like, you can't question that wisdom. And I really want that opportunity, but at the same time, like, I know it's not right for me now, which is a really difficult decision to tackle with for myself. One that I'm absolutely convinced that I made the right decision, but I kind of just wanted to highlight that as a point of, like, you can't do everything at once, and sometimes you do have to prioritize, even if that means sort of, you know, deferring on like a fantastic opportunity. So potentially, fingers crossed, that opportunity will turn to fruition next year, and that's something I can give more attention to. But I'm just not in the position right now, given like work deadlines and, as I say, sort of personal stuff as well, where like, I can give the full attention that something like that deserves. And knowing, or having learned so much about myself over the last couple of years of being full-time as an author, I don't want to put out anything into the universe that's half-assed, especially when, you know, it has the potential to be seen by lots of people. So yeah, growth, but also just a weird one.
Yeah. The problem with growth is that it's usually accompanied by pain. Growing pains, right?
Yep. Stop me playing football.
I was just gonna say, and sometimes, like, well, I mean, yeah, the growth comes after the pain, doesn't it? Like, you kind of, you're trying to force your way through something, in whatever way, whether it's personal, business, interpersonal. Sorry, I enjoy that term, so I just thought I'd throw it in there. You keep going and you keep trying, even against better wisdom within you. And I think it is a huge testament, especially considering the opportunity, that you listen to that voice, you listen to yourself, and you handled it with integrity. Yeah, it was like, I had a good conversation with the guys that run it, and I was just honest and upfront, because what else can you be in that situation? And as I say, like, I do want it. I really want it. But yeah, just, you know, the timing's not right, and as I say, like, I'm not prepared to not give my best, especially sort of going forward. So yeah, it's been like kind of a bittersweet week, because as I say, it's been productive in the sense of, like, I'm hitting the things that are sort of core fundamental I need to hit. I've sort of superseded some of those. But yeah, I mean, had this been a couple of years back, I would have gone for it. Maybe I would have given something like a little subpar. But yeah, that's not what I'm about. So that's my week. I'm excited by the opportunities I am currently working on, and time-wise, I think I'm on about 4.5 weeks until I've potentially finished my ghostwriting, and can turn my attention fully to activated authors, fully to my own fiction, which is something that I don't think will sink in until it happens, just because I'm very, very intensely working on this final book. It's an interesting week, to say the least. What's something you've enjoyed this week? I think I know what yours is going to be. Do you think? Well, before I get to that, I just want to say that I am just insanely proud of you.
Thank you.
I think the fact that I'm going to get emotional, because that's just who I am. I'm like a clusterfuck of emotions housed in a thin skin suit. The fact that you felt and knew that burnout was coming, and you're looking after yourself, and you're prioritizing that. The fact that you understood that right now isn't the time for TEDx, and like I say, you conducted yourself with integrity. And just the fact that, like you say, if this was a few years back, that wouldn't have happened. So the growth in that, and also just it makes me like joyful, gleeful, giddy beyond the telling of it, to know that in like 5 weeks' time, that's done.
Mm-hmm.
And we get some more Willcocks originals coming into the world, and I'm very excited to read them, and I'm very excited for you.
Yeah, well, there's no point in me running activated authors and teaching all this stuff. I'm not going to live by my own advice. So like, all I hope is that, in some way I can kind of set an example for the people in the community, the people that listen to this podcast, that like, you don't have to kill yourself for opportunities. Like, they will come back around. And if you're committed to sticking with writing and publishing and creating books, and that's like your journey and the thing you want to achieve, then things will happen. And sometimes things won't go as planned, but that's life. That's just how life operates. And like, I'm definitely in a much better mental and physical position than I was a couple of years back. I mean, I think we all are. Like 2 years ago was freaking pandemic.
Oh.
Apart from my brother, who lost like 4 stone, so he did well with that.
Yeah, there's always one.
And thank you for that, Sam. But yeah, what have you enjoyed this week?
2 things, and they are tied. One is I will save that for the next question. Okay, Reacher. Is that where you thought I was going? I assume. Yeah. Oh my God, it has been a hot minute since I have sat down and watched something like new with my full attention. So my intention originally was to do some cross stitch and watch something, because I am also 90, and cross stitch soothes me because it's very repetitive. But I made the mistake of, because I've been wanting to watch it for a while, but I've been too busy to sit down and indulge myself. And when I was like, okay, what am I going to watch? I was just like, Preacher. And then I made the mistake of pressing play on it before I had my cross stitch pattern and threads out. I have not done one stitch, and I have watched the entire 8 episodes of that season, and it is, it's brilliant. It's really, like, I will say that I have Killing Floor on my shelf, because after the Tom Cruise films and hearing from multiple people, many of whom are ex-army, being really annoyed by the fact that Tom Cruise looks nothing like Reacher as described. I was like, oh, okay, because like I didn't mind the Reacher films, they were fine, but it was very much a Tom Cruise film. Like it didn't, it was Tom Cruise doing what Tom Cruise does, crazy stunts and fights. And when I saw the trailer a few months back for Reacher on Amazon, and I saw who they had to play him, I was like, oh, they got a tank. Okay. If they've kind of been loyal to that, and it's a season which then opens it up for it to be more loyal to the source material. Yeah, I assume. So I was really excited to watch it, and it really is like, it's phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. I'm not saying like it's gonna change the world. It is very much of its genre of what it is. It is a tale of a chaotic good drifter that like bumbles into the wrong town. Well, he doesn't fucking bumble, like the guy strides into a town at kind of the wrong time and gets caught up in a whole heap of horseshit, and has to dig his way out, basically, with bodies dropping left and right and some seriously disgusting fights. Yeah. But it does sound good. Yeah, it was just one of those things. It was more just the fact that I could actually allow myself to do that. And 2 nights in a row, I'm just saying. Anyway, that's enough about me. Although I will say, hot damn that man. Like, I don't know what he does or what he eats. I don't know whether he eats other people to be that size. He's huge. But yeah, no, it was very enjoyable. And I feel that, like, I've said this to you before, you know, like when you leave the cinema after seeing like Captain America or something, and you're like, well, I think we all can agree that I am Captain America now.
Yeah.
It's given me that kind of feeling, and I love that feeling. So yeah, that's
nice. I love it when that happens. I was saying to someone the other day that, like, for me, I feel like reading sometimes is reading 20 books to find the one that lights you up.
Yes.
Because like you can enjoy like lots of books, but then there are certain stories that just grab you, and it's those ones that you're hunting for. And it sounds like that in TV form.
Yes, because I'm a sucker for chaotic good.
Yeah.
Sucker for it. Yeah. How about you? What have you enjoyed this week?
So I think the one that I'll go to is I've been listening to the audiobook of Jimmy Carr's biography type book, Before and Laughter, which I think is an amazing title. And he jokes on a TV show that wasn't the original title that he wanted to go with, but his publisher wouldn't let him go with Jim Will Fix It.
Oh, dark.
But it's fantastic, and there's something about Jimmy Carr. I don't know what it is, but like I've seen him live a couple of times, and he's phenomenal. But there's something really personable about him, even though he looks like, you know, a ventriloquist dummy.
He really does.
He really does,
like
more so the more plastic surgery and stuff that he has. But I mean, he jokes about that in the book. Like he's not one to kind of like, you know, what's the word? Throw punches isn't what I'm looking for. Anyway, but yeah, there's something I just really like about him because he's genuine, and particularly since he's released this book, he's done sort of a circuit of interviews and things. He was on Diary of a CEO, and he's kind of stepping a little bit out of the comedy scene to do more of like the life stuff, what he's learned, what, you know, comedy has given him, like life experiences and things. And it's like, it sounds like, well, potentially sounds like quite a pretentious thing, but like there's so much in that book that I wanted to put in my book. And I likely will, because we've all got our own spin on stuff. But like, it's a book about comedy and his ascension into where he got to. But so much of it is just about the truths of life. And the more people I speak to, and you know, some of this comes out on the interview that we have coming up. So much of life is presented to us and is right in front of us. And like we're told the lessons 1,000 times, but we always think there's like a smarter way. And it's all of that distilled, and there are quotes in there. There's like stories, because he was weirdly quite good friends with people like Stephen Hawking. So stories from that, and of course, like they were both Cambridge graduates. But it's just done in kind of the Jimmy Carr form. Like there's sort of quite dark humor in there, like a lot of jokes and things. But the actual message of the whole thing, like it's beautiful, and you know, it's the story of someone who found their purpose and followed it, and followed their passion, and you know, just all the things. So I highly recommend that. And you know, if you get a chance to listen to the audiobook, it is narrated by himself with a few sort of audio extras for that kind of audience. I'm just throwing my wire around everywhere. But yeah, it's fantastic, really, really good. So I recommend that.
Nice.
What have you been working on this week, Sam?
Poems.
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 Why do people say poems? It really annoys me.
Poems.
So I was listening to a poem.
I've been working on my poems this week.
I've been working on my poems by Robert Frost.
Poems. Yeah, so
no offense if you do say poems, I just find it weird.
It's like people that say buzz instead of bus, so Birmingham.
Or film. Anyway, we digress.
Or the theatre. I think we've now demographically insulted,
abuse everyone.
Yeah, so we're good. We've equaled it out. Yeah, so part of my, as you well know, part of my meltdown was just feeling very, I don't even know the word, just impotent, creatively impotent, I guess.
Yep.
Because of how much stuff I want to do, because of how much stuff I intend to do, because of the kind of impacts that I would like to have, because of the people that I know I want to help, I got completely sucked under for a while now. I think it's been coming, like I've been struggling on the surface for a while. And it was actually in the expert panel that we had on,
which was phenomenal, by the way.
Oh my God. It was actually like, yeah, it's exactly what I needed, because, and it was Monday, wasn't it?
Twas.
Yeah. So I obviously, like I said, I'd had the real rough time, fallen asleep on Zoom. And yeah, that expert panel, I almost didn't go because I was in such a dark place, but because it was all about productivity, and I was like, no offense, but what do 3 neurotypical dudes have to do with what is going on in my brain right now? And number one, it was just fun, because like just Inez and Fenton together, you wouldn't think it worked, but my God, was it wonderful. But mostly it was that thing of, peppered throughout was the same thing of focus on the one thing, finish the one thing, move on to the next thing. And like from you and Jonathan and Thomas, just that, like, you're all so very different people, that was the core message of it. And I know this anyway. I know that, like, finishing stuff is how you get stuff done, but it's I'd invested myself too deeply into everything, so I was having mum guilt when I was doing one thing, and felt like I'd abandoned all the other children. But I just made a decision. I was like, right, that's it, this is what I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to focus on it until it's done. So I have written poems this week, and I'm very happy with them.
Good.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I love that. And just for people who might not be aware of what the expert panel is, probably might not have heard some of those episodes, but as part of the Activated Authors community, we have a group of experts who are working professionals in a bunch of different mediums and circumstances, and they come in once a month and we do like a live Q&A on themed topics. So we have Luke Condor, my old buddy, my old writing pal, comic guy, all the things. We have Chris Kane, who is just incredible. We have, this is where I step up on like people in my head. We have Helen Scheurer, best-selling author of fantasy. We have Jeff Adams, best-selling author of gay romance fiction.
No, gay romance, that's it.
And also host of the Big Gay Fiction podcast.
We'll get there. That's why I said fiction.
Jonathan Yanez, sci-fi writer and also movie maker now. He's working on feature films and he's got those funded. And then Thomas Fenton, who is the director of flicks such as Saw 4 and I Spit on Your Grave 2 and a bunch of horror flicks, but has just worked in Hollywood for years. So, excuse me. Oh, wow. I told you he all does that sometimes. And
don't talk for drinking it.
They come in every month. We have, a selection of them will come in every month. We'll have a Q&A, record it, and just people can ask questions and have a good time. There's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But yeah,
particularly.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Gemful. Yes. What have you been working on?
Yeah, all the replays are available as on our archives as well for people.
Yes, that is true. Yeah.
What have I been working on? I have been working on ghostwriting. I have been working on calendar organizing, systematizing. I've done a lot of updates to, this can sound really boring, but the onboarding of Activated Authors. So I've made things a lot easier, simpler, and more information packed for new members that come into Activated Authors. So all the process kind of streamlined. So if people sign up, there's immediately sort of like welcome options, all these different things to kind of like outline how it all works.
It's now nutrient dense.
Yes. And I'm really happy about that, because it's been something that's kind of been on my mind for a while, because this community, this membership site stuff, it's very it is new to me. I've not run stuff like this before. Like, I know how to run them, I've been a part of them before, like I've sort of led quite a few different communities and things, but actually the operational side of setting it all up, of the websites and things, I've been learning a lot of that myself, so it's a lot smoother now. And as part of that, just as an announcement on the podcast, it is now set up so that anyone who would like to try out Activated Authors 30 days for absolutely free, you can go over to activatedauthors.com and all the information is there on the website on how to get involved. And the heart of that is that you get to join in our weekly writing sprints with myself, with Sam, with all the wonderful authors at the Activated Authors community. And it's just a chill environment where people can come in, they can write together. ask questions, share laughs. And this morning we were looking at lots of different synonyms for romantic ways to talk about ankles. It was a strange conversation. Thank you. Thank you, Megan Faye. But yeah, so it's 30 days for free. If you want to try it, check it out. If you want to cancel at the end of that, no problem at all. You can just jump straight out. But yeah, it's all there for you, and it's all smooth and fresh and wonderful.
Delicious leg wrists.
Delicious leg wrists.
There you go.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Just off the top of the dome there.
Leg wrists. Oh my God. Oh, it's horrible.
I know.
Weekly wins. So our weekly win this week goes out to our wonderful River. I never know Hemans. Sorry, River. But River ran her first, or is running her first Kickstarter campaign. If you're listening to this, it will have been live for 4 or 5 days. As of the time of recording, it is the second day, and it is already over 150% funded. So congratulations, River. But for anyone that wants to find out what's going on, because there will still be, I think, about 8 or 9 days on that Kickstarter left, you can get your hands on what is going to be a kick-ass fantasy book called Near Graves, and it's part of the Order series. And yeah, there's lots of goodies you can get your hands on. But yeah, just like knowing River through the community and seeing the work that she's putting behind the scenes, like just it looks like that cover is.
Oh my God, that artwork is stunning. It's like that. You could frame that and put it in a freaking gallery.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
So we'll pop a link in the show notes. Sorry, Sam, if you want to check that out. But yeah, massive congratulations, River. You have thrashed your goal, which is wonderful.
My soul dies every time I hear you say that.
I know. Link in
show notes. I'm like, less of the we.
The royal we. Interestingly, is that what Liz calls that when she goes to the bathroom? So our guest. Oh my God, my mind is all over the place with that at the minute.
Who do we have this week, Daniel?
This week we have a wonderful friend of mine, a very, very fantastic horror author, Dan Howarth. Dan Howarth is the mastermind behind Northern Republic Publishing. He has a bunch of anthologies to his names, a bunch of books to his names. He is one of the co-founders of This Is Horror podcast, and he's just an all-round like amazing guy. I spent the weekend with him at Chillicon a couple of weeks ago in Scarborough. First time we met face to face in person, although we've sort of spoken online for a fair few years, and it's just a riveting guy. And in this conversation, we go into horror, we go into habit, routine, discipline, all the things that you need to get your writing done. And I'll leave it at that because I could say a lot, but I'm going to save it until after the interview. So without any further ado, over to Dan and Dan.
Double D's.
Double D's. Dan Howarth is a Mancunian-born horror writer now living in Merseyside. He's the author of Dark Missives and his latest release, Territory, and his writing has appeared in numerous publications, both online and in print. Most notably, a number of Dan's stories have appeared on the Other Stories podcast, where they have been downloaded over 100,000 times. Dan is also the co-editor of 3 themed anthologies alongside James Everington, one of which, Imposter Syndrome, was shortlisted for a British Fantasy Award. When not writing, Dan enjoys craft beer, German football, and barbecue food. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me. Delighted to be here.
It's going to be a fun one, Dan and Dan. Don't often get that.
Absolutely. Dan squared. Yeah.
I love it. I'm gonna zero in because I always like to start with sort of just a little anecdotes that people throw into their intros. And it's got here, you enjoy craft beer, German football, and barbecue food. It's a real mix of pleasantries, but it's also in a strange way kind of British, a bit American, and also obviously quite German. What is it about craft beer, German football, and barbecue food that you like?
Particularly when you combine the 3 of them. They can all be very social activities. Craft beer, you head out with some friends, you can brew your own as well, which I would not recommend trying, having done it myself. But if you're, culinary whiz, then yeah, by all means, you can brew your own beer. Barbecue food, it's those long afternoons out in the family, in the garden with the family, sunshine, meat cooking low and slow. And German football has just got more soul than British football, so it's a little bit more niche, a little bit more interesting. And also, you can drink on the terraces there, so it brings it all the way back round to my first interest.
Nice, I like that. A full big circle. What do you mean German football has more soul? And I'm not saying this is like an antagonistic thing. I've kind of pulled away from the football scene myself a while ago. But how does German football have more soul? What does that mean?
Well, over here, football is very commercial. It's a lot of money invested in it, gambling sponsorships, all that kind of stuff, dodgy deals with nefarious states and things like that. But in Germany, the clubs are all still owned by the fans. So there's a rule whereby the fans have to own 50% plus one share of every club, meaning that they have the final say on club matters. Whereas over here, fans are just customers. It's give us your money, shut up and watch the game.
Yeah. Imagine if people did that with books and the readers owned half your book.
Oh God, could you imagine some of the edits you get back?
Given certain people's opinion and feedback, like, you should change this word. I don't want to. I like that word.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit.
Would never be allowed to die.
No.
Yeah,
Oh no.
It's the only way to make the Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones books. The only way to make those a more convoluted process would be to let the fans buy in and have a say, I think.
Oh God. Although I kind of feel like even then they probably have more chance of getting finished.
No comments. I'm not going to be that guy.
So tell us a little bit about your writing journey, how you got started, kind of what you've been up to and how you've gotten to where you are today.
Okay, so yeah, where to start? I mean, I think it's one of those things, as I'm sure you'll be able to kind of chime in with, is there's always been that inclination there to write something. I think there are a few different types of people when it comes to books. There are people who love books and love to read, but their interest begins and ends there, really, which personally isn't for me. But I think even as a young age, I was always the one kind of trying to think of my own endings, perhaps, of books I was reading, or coming up with a sequel to a book that I'd enjoyed. And that's kind of how it started as a younger kid, really, going from there. Got distinct memories, like ghost stories were always my thing as a kid. Got distinct memories of like reading them to other kids on the school buses, like on trips and stuff like that. So it's always that kind of storytelling has always been with me. I think probably started trying to write properly, school, bit through college, university, didn't have any discipline at all, pretty much until, so my daughter is 6 now, so just before she was born, like it was almost around the time that I knew I was going to be a dad. I was like, God, I better start doing some of the stuff in my life that I want to do, which arguably is, I know you've got a child, is probably the worst possible timing to start thinking about yourself. But at the same time, I feel like it really crystallized certain things for me in that, your life is finite. Your life, is your own, despite the fact that you then end up sharing it with your child and your family. But just because you're a father doesn't mean you can't have goals of your own, or just because you're a parent doesn't mean you can't have dreams of your own. Mm-hmm. And I think some of it crystallized for me when my daughter was born, because time became more compressed. Whereas previously I would spend all evening, I'm going to go and do some writing. You spend 3 hours in front of the computer and write about 100 words because it's just messing about, and my routine isn't right, I wasn't feeling it, blah 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 blah. But when time becomes compressed, that's when things start to it's make or break, really. And I think in many ways it made me. So 2016, my output just started to really kind of spiral and start to gather some momentum, really escalate. And I just thought it's now or never, and I've just been pushing myself to get there ever since. So I think it was 2018 I finished my first novel, and just from there I've written at least one every year since, including this year. I'm just about to finish one. So I brought out 2 books. I've been involved in other publications, but I've got 2 books in my own name, so they've both come out under Northern Republic, which is my own label. So I got Dark Missives, which is a short story collection, and then Territory, which came out last month, which is a snowbound horror novella set in the wild, rural Finland hunting communities.
Both fantastic reads. We'll pop links in the show notes as well. It's been really interesting. So for listeners, me and you go back a ways. I don't know when we first officially started talking. We've definitely sort of like floated around the same circles for a while, and then earlier this year kind of ended up sharing an Airbnb at Chillicon. And so it's been that thing of like seeing your name pop up, and obviously increasingly as you've kind of like gone a bit closer, and it's been fun watching your journey and watching as the books have started coming out, and as you say, you've got your own sort of imprint and things now. But it all, as you say, it all comes back to that crystallization moment of the child. And as you were talking, it's so reflective of my own experience, because it was around the time that Bailey's mum got pregnant with Bailey that I had very much the same thoughts. It's that thing of suddenly like there seems to be a catalyst moment there of, oh shit, like now I really like I'm accountable to, like I'm gonna at some point I'm gonna be something that someone looks up to, and who is that person going to be? I'm very much in control of what that person is going to be. Like now is the time to start making that happen. And I was the same. I started writing my first book in 2015. So the timeline, I started writing my first book in 2015. End of 2014 is when Bailey was born. So it's in those early moments when times were hardest and like there was no spare time that I managed to somehow find the time to do the thing. It's really interesting how in having your back against the wall and having those reduced hours, that is really the moment in which you start to really, as you say, find your discipline. How has that carried over for you in the time since your daughter has sort of gone over? How has that discipline carried forward? What does that look like for you?
So often time to write at home of an evening or a weekend. I mean, even now I still don't write on the weekends as a regular thing, simply because family life, as anybody who's got kids or lives in a household with others, can be chaotic. There can be things that can appear, oh god, we forgot about this kid's party, we've got to go, well that was my hour to write today, or whatever. All those things kind of crop up. So I try to squeeze what I can do into kind of the working day. So it started when I was working at a council not too far away, and over the road they had a library. So my routine became lunchtime. So I block it out of my calendar every day, literally no meetings. And whether I'm writing at lunchtime or not, I feel it's important to make this statement for people who have office jobs. There is a special place in hell for people who set meetings over lunchtime. If you are one of those people, I'll see you down in the fiery depths.
Screw you, Philip.
Just go away. Like seriously, let people eat. What's wrong with you? But so it'd come to 11:59 and I'd lean down. I had my laptop with me. I'd lean down, turn on the personal laptop because it took so long to load up. So I'd leave it in my bag, kind of open a little bit so I could get it loading up while I came out, down the stairs, across the road, up into the library, up to the top floor of the library because it was always quietest. Sit down. That's my hour to write. Okay. No getting up until 1 o'clock. Even if I have a meeting, I'd turn up late. It's just a case of 12 to 1, absolutely no excuses. I'm there. And that was the first commitment, was putting that time aside. Because at the end of the day, what else are you going to do with a lunch hour, was the way I could see it. And I've been lucky in the jobs that I have when I go into the office. For some reason, I don't know whether it's conscious or subconscious, I always end up working opposite a library. Even now, I actually still do when I go into the office. So that works out well for me. It's still the same routine, and that's really important to me. But what else am I going to do? Sit there and read the newspaper or a magazine or muck about on my phone or whatever? It was wasted time. So I was like, right, I can claim this time. Nobody can take it away from me. I haven't got family commitments. I haven't got work stuff because it's lunchtime. Over I go. So it started off as an hour every day. And then after I'd kind of got used to just spending the hour and doing as much as I could, I'd be like, right, wouldn't it be great if in this hour I can write 250 words, which at first was a bit of a big deal. Once I was hitting that regularly, I was like, right, I'm going to push on now. I'm going to try and hit 500 an hour. Then I was hitting that regularly, and then I upped it. I think 1,000 is what I can do in an hour now, and that's comfortable. That's my routine now. So it was just a case of firstly blocking the time off, then setting incremental goals, smaller up to, I could probably push it and do 1,500 if I was really desperate. But I mean, this is first draft, just kind of brain dump stuff, really. So I think with the extra 500, I might be getting into the real dregs territory in terms of the words. Some of them might end up being unfixable. But yeah, so it was just a case of setting small goals and just incrementally improving my focus. There was no phone, there was nothing there other than just me and the keyboard. And sooner or later, it's put up or shut up. You get it done, or you realize that maybe writing isn't for you, and you don't have the discipline to really take it anywhere.
So I kind of want to drill down into this, because I think this is incredibly important, like all things you're saying, because we're talking here about obviously building the habit of, the discipline of writing, of prioritizing the things that, prioritizing that long-term view over, the short-term discomfort of, sacrificing that hour at lunchtime and well, sacrifice is an arguable term. But that's not an easy thing to build. And, if it was as easy as taking an hour in your lunch break just to disappear somewhere, write those words, build it up, as you said, then obviously loads more people will be doing it. But I've actually had a chat recently with some of the activated authors in which we were talking about like, why do we do this? Because there's no immediate payment. There's no like financial gain from the start. It seems like this strange form of torture to put ourselves through this for like, so say arguably 1,000 words per that hour, 60 hours, if we're looking at a 60,000 word novel, sat down by ourselves in these rooms doing this thing, when there are so many other alternatives out there for quick distraction, quick entertainment, socializing. I'm not saying any of this to be judgmental, because I was the guy that used to walk past the group of people on their lunch break socializing, so I could go to my local library and get the work done, because that's what I wanted to do. But what was that process like of, making that decision, going through that, and like, why do we do this to suffer?
I think the thing is, when it comes to writing, you either burn for it or you don't. There are people who I know that will write how I would term recreationally, and this isn't to be disparaging. They will sit down once every couple of weeks and tap away at a short story, and that's great. Anybody who's got any kind of creative output, I always respect, whether they're writing once a year or writing once a day. That doesn't matter. But I think the difference between some of those writers and, the people who are at least trying to pursue higher goals within their writing career is you either burn inside and you have that feeling where you need to write every day, or you don't. I'm not really sure how you nurture that burn. I'm not sure I've ever nurtured it. I mean, I personally, and this is the strange thing about it, is, I want to get as far as I can with my writing career. I want to be able to, to achieve things. I want to be able to one day turn up at Waterstones somewhere, wherever it is. There's one of my books on the shelf. That's the ultimate goal for me. Now, I don't know how I arrived at that goal. It's just something that has arbitrarily popped into my head a few years ago. But that's the aim. So how else do you get there other than sitting down every day and chipping away at it? There is no other way to do it. And books don't write themselves. And ultimately, is that in my mind when I sit down every day? Probably not. But it probably was at the start, and that's what I burnt for. And that's what helped me to establish the habit, I think, really, is thinking about end goals and thinking about what you want your output to look like when you look back at, well, it's not even a writing career, is it? When you look back at your life, you look back at what you could have achieved. And to me, there was a big line to be drawn. And again, this isn't being disparaging of, did I want to sit around and chat with some colleagues who I, thought were all right, but that's it. I could sit and eat my sandwiches with them, or I can go away and try and achieve something. And to me, it just wasn't a question, really. I guess it wasn't a contest, and that's why I've ended up. I mean, I am quite an obsessive person, and I think I've unlocked something through writing that I've never had before. Now, it's a strange feeling, and I'm sure you can probably relate to this, Dan, because you're pretty serious about what you do, as an understatement.
Arguably.
But as kids, there's people who want to be a musician, or there's lads who I know wanted to be a footballer, or or people want to be actors and stuff like that. I never wanted to pursue a career particularly. It was, I was never driven to think, oh, I want to be a lawyer, or I want to be a scientist or whatever. I didn't have that drive. I didn't want to be a footballer. I knew I couldn't do it. My musical skills are negligible. Other things I'm probably quite poor at. But it was only really when I started writing and taking it seriously that I understood that this was something that I did burn for. I achieved, it's something I want to achieve. And I'd never been lit up like that before, really. I don't think I'd never had that drive or determination, not at school, not at university, not in other scenarios. But this is me. I've unlocked that part of me that wants to achieve and wants to get better. And, there's no putting that back in the box once it's out. It doesn't fit anymore. You can't put it away.
Yeah. No, I definitely feel a lot of what you're saying. I think one of the things for me, especially with writing, is like all the control starts and ends with you. like if you're a footballer, obviously you can develop your skills, you can do stuff, but in order to obviously play for a team, you have to work to be on that team. There's like other people that are in charge of your fate. And, you know, you can argue, you know, that's the case with getting yourself published, especially if your end goal is like Waterstones, but there are so many options with your writing and so many chances to put yourself out there. And ultimately, as long as you're, you know, putting in the work and improving your craft, you're in a position in which you're just slowly getting better each day. And there is some weird internal fire that just brings back to the page. And I was kind of being a bit antagonistic with, you know, suffering and sacrificing and all that kind of like terminology, because at the end of the day, like, it's not suffering if you enjoy what you do, and sitting down and make sure you do that every day. Like there's such bliss and escapism in creating worlds. And like it does sound like we kind of have very, very similar trajectories, especially with sort of like that habit. And, you know, I think we'll probably come back to this a lot, but like the routine and the discipline of just making the words happen. Did you in the beginning have other people that were almost like showing you the way or giving you some kind of example, or was this a sort of did you come to this all by yourself, this idea of just sitting down and making the words happen?
I think, well, like creatively, I've kind of there are musicians in my family. So my dad is a musician, and that was his thing when he was a younger man. And as he said before, you know, he's come to music again later, and he's like, you know, he said to me once, maybe even forgetting who he was speaking to, I shelved it while I had the kids. But you're literally talking to one of them, you know. How does that? And then he's kind of, oh yeah, this guy, still here, right? You know, I forgot what the question was, to be quite honest. But I think in terms of inspiration, you find your own tribe, really, don't you? I mean, about 10 years ago, I was living somewhere different. There was a creative writing group there, which I joined, and found some of them, you know, kind of writing things that perhaps not necessarily of interest to me, much in the same way I was probably writing things that weren't of interest to them, really. So I kind of turned up as a mid-20s horror writer to deal with 40 and 50-year-olds who were writing poetry and romance novels and stuff like that.
So similar.
But then I did meet somebody there who was into horror and all that kind of stuff, and through her and with her, I kind of became a bit more involved in like the British horror scene. So we met people like Simon Bestwick and Simon Unsworth, Gary McMahon, writers like that. We kind of introduced each other to, both kind of physically and in terms of the books. And it kind of started there, really. So a lot of it was kind of done online. But the main kind of sparring partner, I guess, that I've had in writing terms is Michael Wilson. So we've known each other probably at least 10 years now. Just chat. I found his old blog, Read Horror, and submitted a book review. You know, said, I'm interested in, you know, reviewing books, and we just got to chatting, got to kind of conversing, talking about writing and books and all that kind of stuff and other things. And we kind of set each other a challenge. I went down to visit him one time. It's like the first time we'd met, and we'd had a few drinks or whatever. We're talking about stories that we'd written, and he said, you know, I've got all these stories, got all these ideas. You know, we need to get ourselves out there. And I said, you know, do you know what, dude? You've got not long, but at one day, you're either going to release these stories, or I'm going to come and I'm going to take them off your hard drive and I'm going to get them out there for you. Like there is no two ways about it. And I think we kind of rather naively, you know, without doing it formally, just challenged ourselves to do more, really. You know, it was clear that we loved what we did, but we weren't doing enough of it at that point. And I think that has led to getting involved in wider horror community and writing community, really. So, and it culminates in things like Chillicon, where we went a couple of months ago. You know, you end up, you know, getting into conversations and getting into groups and forming connections with all sorts of different people in different genres, you know, of different walks of life, of different levels of success and drive. And every single one of them, if you cultivate those friendships and relationships correctly, can add something to you. And in some ways you can help others as well, which is always gratifying too.
Connection is huge. Community is huge. For people unaware, Michael David Wilson and yourself founded the This Is Horror podcast. I have had an interview on Great Writer Share, which we'll get the link for, because that was a fantastic chat with Michael David Wilson about all the stuff he's got going on as well. But having found, someone that inspires you, I think kind of in essence, your equivalent of meeting Michael is myself meeting Luke. And I do feel like my own journey was kickstarted really when I met Luke. And you find someone similar, you find someone with that shared passion, you find someone who just has just very, very similar goals and very similar drive and very similar motivation to that. What were those early days like when it was kind of you two challenging each other and trying to make it happen?
Yeah, they were fun. I mean, it's always been fun, and it's when we say challenging, it's never in a competitive sense.
Yeah,
it's just a case of I want to do this, we'll make it happen. The extension of that now is this horror Patreon challenges. I don't know if you've seen any of this knocking around.
No, but I think I do need to jump back on and be a TIH patron.
Yeah, so they've got a Discord group, which, is kind of absolutely humming at the moment. And this all came from Michael's thing through Lit Reactor in the Slack group, which I think Luke Condor was involved in, and Kev Harrison, a few other people that we mutually know, where Michael, took on the kind of Ray Bradbury challenge of writing a story a week for a year. And that was very successful. So what we're kind of pushing people to do now is take on new challenges. So there are 3 distinct challenges that are kind of been muted, but you can make up your own. So the first one is write a novel in 3 months. Second is a novella in a month, or short story a week for as long as you can manage it. So those are the kind of 3 criteria. So this started in July, and I think this is really just an extension of how me and Michael have always operated with each other. It's I'm going to get this novel out. Okay, well, yeah, that sounds good. Maybe I'll do one too. Or I'm writing a script of one of my books. Oh, that's not the worst idea. Maybe I'll try that. It's not always a kind of why don't you do this, but sometimes you see somebody going off in a different direction. You think, oh, I could have a go at that. Actually, that looks quite good. He's having fun doing that, or he's coming up with new ideas that maybe I kind of want to start opening my mind up in that kind of way. It's always useful to have somebody who you're working kind of with and for, who is pushing either new ground or it's just there to tell you that actually when you feel like shit, that's okay, because they have too. Or if they've got a high, you're like, oh yeah, so have I. We're both doing great. And oftentimes it's looking back and saying, oh, do you remember 5 years ago when we weren't doing this? Or, do you remember the first time you tried to write a novel and failed? But, look at it now, you're doing X, Y, and Z. Those kind of, it's the perspective, I think, that is often very helpful of, some days you'll sit down and you go, oh, I've done 1,000 words today, but I won't keep many of those. It's that perspective of, well, think back, just a few years, you probably weren't even doing that many words a day. Yes, the quality isn't the best, but you can fix those things later. I think it's just that perspective of how far you've come can often help to push you even further forward in the future as well.
Yeah, and absolutely finding the right person. I found that I've had accountability partners, which obviously a bit more of a formal way of putting it, but over the years in which some have worked really well. Like if me and Luke go into some kind of challenge, or, when we were co-writing books together, we were very, very accountable to each other. Yeah, there are other relationships in which it's all well intended to go, okay, like I'm going to do this by this day, and like, why don't you do this? And for whatever reason, there's just not that same connection. There's not that same sort of commitment to the other person. So finding that right person is key. And knowing what I know of Michael, he is a ball of flames. So I do not envy you. In riding that. He's an exacting individual, and I think that works well. I mean, I think when you've talked about accountability partners and stuff, and you've come back to Luke, I've always had Michael, and recently, Kev Harrison is somebody who I'd also class as a very close writing friend. It stems from the friendship, I think. I think if it's just somebody who online you don't necessarily know, you can get to know friends online, obviously, before you meet them in person. That's kind of not what I'm getting at. If it's somebody that you not have that relationship with, I find it can be harder because you don't always talk in the detail that perhaps you need. As we've discussed about being a parent, sometimes there might be an issue at home that is impacted on your writing or shaped something that you've done. If you don't know somebody, you might not open up about that, and therefore
you don't explore why that issue is either pushing you on or pulling you back. You know, I think the friendship is the key thing before you get into somebody who's just arbitrarily going to be tweeting, I've done my 1,000 words today, have you, at Dan Willcocks? You know, it's, you know, does that help? Not necessarily. It's a case of being there for each other and either pulling or pushing. You know, sometimes somebody will pull you from the front or push you from behind, but as long as you get there and that person knows what you're going through and can empathize, they can usually help.
Yeah. And as you've mentioned a few times, so what your main genre, unless I'm much mistaken, is horror. Something I get asked a lot, and something that I have spent a long time sort of shaping my answer to, I guess. And it's like I always ask other horror authors because it's fascinating to know. I think you know what the question is. Like, why write horror? What is it about horror that draws you to the page?
I think that's just come from always being a kid. Like I said, I always read ghost stories, and they were like my favorite kind of thing growing up. So it would be, you know, grandparents come over, and my granddad was irresponsible in many ways. None of them criminal, most of them just mad, like letting you shoot an air rifle at 7 years old and mad stuff like that. Like, you know, he was a good bloke, but one of them extended to arguably too young, telling me loads of ghost stories and kind of stories about when he was in the war and all that kind of stuff. And every story that there was to him, it was almost like a little bit of like the Roald Dahl short stories.
Yes.
There was always some horrible twist to them or something. And I think that has always stayed with me. Like as a reader, I was never kind of fussed on, you know, like the Hardy Boys or the Famous Five or whatever as a kid. It was Goosebumps, it was ghost stories, it was, you know, sneak in a copy of my dad's Stephen King novels, you know, it's all that kind of stuff. That was just always the way that it was. So when it came my turn to write, it was just a natural extension of what I like to read. There was no, I mean, and it's not always horror as in the supernatural, you know, horror in terms of, you know, very dark crime or dark humor. Some of my favorite books by a guy called Will Carver. So his books are borderline crime, but also horror. So he's written one about like a suicide cult. So horrific, but not traditionally horror. He's written a book that's narrated from the perspective of evil itself, which is extremely unique and interesting, and I would recommend. So it's always been that kind of darker side, really, you know, crime, very dark crime, thrillers of that nature, even extending out to things like This Is England, you know, the film and things like that, where it's kind of a gritty, realistic darkness. As long as it's got a dark edge to it, I'm interested. And that's just always how I've been programmed, really.
Yeah, I love it as well because so many people in horror. I'm yet to meet anyone who writes horror who is a dick. I'm sure they are out there, but I'm yet to meet them because most of the horror writers that I speak to are just lovely people, friendly, warm, welcoming, and just the opposite of what so many people assume horror writers to be.
Absolutely. I think we know how to have fun. I genuinely do think that, you know, we're the type of people who sit down and think, it's been a shit day, but what would make it worse? A big monster with tentacles crawling in through the window and ripping your face off. That'd make it worse. I think whilst horror is, you know, very dark, I think there's almost a lightness in terms of being able to escape in that way through horror. I think it provides people a lot of comfort, and I've seen numerous people during the pandemic as well tweeting along those lines saying, you know, the world is grim, but at least I can escape into something that's tangential to it. You know, I can fly away on a spaceship, or I can deal with a Lovecraftian god, and that's my escape. You know, there is a lightness there to it. There is escapism. And horror writers are a lot of fun. I think we've, you know, every event I've ever been to, everybody's been lovely. You know, people are welcoming, they're warm, and I think, you know, it's a smaller genre than some. You know, you look at the romance genre or the crime genre. Maybe we're the red-headed stepchild to some extent, and we're shunned in the corner of the family meals. But for that reason, we know how to make our own fun away from the grown-ups. So, yeah, it's
absolutely
good.
And one of the things that I really admired about you, so we met in person for the first time in Scarborough at Chilicon. Had a roaring weekend. Like, I'm still lamenting the fact that it's not still going on. But one thing that I really, really admired about you, and obviously it's a testament to kind of, you know, your history with the podcast and all the other people you've spoken to, and also just kind of like your attitude towards, I guess, horror and developing yourself as a writer. Like, you were working the hell out of those rooms. Like, you had so many faces of people that you knew. Obviously, like, you were pushing territory and like putting out advanced copies, things like that. There was no, like, every time I turned around, you was chatting to someone else, and it was kind of inspiring to me, because what I saw in those moments was this history of being in this genre and, you know, learning this genre, and not only, you know, taking things from the genre, but adding things to the genre and your own spin as well. And nothing that you seem to, because sometimes in those situations where you're going around to those kind of conferences and you see people handing out books, it seems really disingenuous, almost like people are kind of just pushing stuff into your hands. But that's not kind of how it felt, at least from the outside. I mean, how do you approach, you know, networking and trying to meet new people and, you know, expanding your understanding of what it is to be in the genre you're in?
I think it pays to be a student, like, to some extent. You know, there's a lot of people at that conference that I'd met before and already knew. So, for example, there was Simon Unsworth there. You know, I introduced him to his wife. I'd known him many years. Like, it's, you know, those kind of connections are built on a friendship level, and I think you need that. You know, it's not, as I think you've touched on it there, it's not about what you can just learn, it's what you can give as well. And the way that I see it is, so, for example, you've had Tim Leben on this show.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as with you, and we've discussed this while we're at Chilicon, we're both massive Tim Leben fans. Like, you know, his books are great. Every one is high concept and, you know, delivered to high quality. You know, he's a fantastic writer. Tim Leben has given me a lot as a reader. He has given me a lot as a writer before I even get to know him. He's inspired me to write, whether he's done it on purpose through emailing me and telling me to write, which he never has, or by putting out his books and me reading them going, oh God, I'd love to write to that level or have ideas along those lines. He's inspired me. And part of getting out there and speaking to people is giving that back as well, because there's nothing better as an author, somebody coming to you and saying, I loved your work. You know, we as readers have a responsibility to writers. If somebody writes something that we like, and I always try and do this, whether it's online or in person, is to tell somebody if they've written something good. So if somebody writes a good article about writing or puts out a good podcast, I'll send them a message, say, oh, thanks for that. Really enjoyed it. It doesn't have to go any further than that, but it's important to do so. And part of what I was trying to do with Territory was to, you know, speak to people like Tim and say, do you know what, you've inspired me. And this is something that I've produced. And I hope that in turn you can, you know, it gives you something knowing that you've inspired other people to write. I hope that helps you with your creativity. I hope that it gives you fuel on a day that you don't feel like knocking out 1,000 words. You know, I think it's all cyclical. We can all help each other. And to some extent, you know, I feel that we as readers and kind of, I would almost say junior writers aspiring to the level of people like Tim and Grady Hendrix and some of the other people that were there, you know, we owe it to them to say, actually, you know, we're not there yet, but when we do get there, we owe you too, because you've helped us, whether you've done it directly or whether you've done it indirectly through books. And I think that is a big part of the horror community. I think we owe authors, you know, that we've read a thank you for when we've enjoyed their work and let them know that they've inspired us. And hopefully that will continue to, you know, inspire them to keep going, and the cycle continues, and we all just keep getting better together, because there's no competition between authors. We're all in it together. So why not be kind and just be nice and be personable and tell people thank you and good luck when you see them.
I love that. I love every part of that. And you're right. I don't think people understand that as authors, we don't actually hear, number one, from other authors, but also from readers half as much as, you know, people think that we do. Obviously, we get like emails occasionally from people, you know, tweets and things that, you know, say we enjoyed your story. But the power of actually just messaging someone and say, like, I enjoyed your work. Like, one of the anthologies that I ended up editing with Julie Heiner was because she reached out as a fan of my work. And it was a couple of years ago, and she asked to do a reading of one of my stories. And we kind of just started a dialogue from there. But she reached out. It wasn't with expectation. It wasn't with anything else. It was just simply like, I really enjoy your work, can I share it? And of course, as an author, I'm going to go, hell yeah. But then it's when you get people that, you know, reach out and you can tell that they're after something in return, and it is obvious in the language and in what you're asking, and, you know, the pacing of how the conversation flows, and it just straight away switches you off. So being able to manage that is a powerful skill. What would you recommend to other authors who are looking to meet authors in their genre, particularly ones that they, you know, that inspire them, ones that may be a little bit further ahead than they are? Do you have any kind of like tips for, you know, reaching out and starting to form those connections?
I think some of it is just being brave. I think not, you know, it doesn't look like it here because we're sat here chatting away and, you know, talking about writing. I think all authors are insecure. I certainly know I am. You know, we all want to achieve things, and if we don't get there, then we get upset with ourselves sometimes, or, you know, you come away from the keyboard and think, that was a load of shit today. But there's always the next session. You know, authors have to be brave, in my opinion. We have to an extent, be sociable, because if you were stuck in your own head the whole time, you know, it would be a very difficult, very sad thing to do. Author communities are so important. So do you know what? Just, I would say, start with the basics. There's nothing personally that I enjoy more as an author or somebody who's trying to put content out, of somebody coming to me and saying, I read your story in X magazine. I really liked it. It doesn't have to be any more than that. You don't have to gush. You know, you don't want to embarrass either yourself or the person receiving the compliment. But, you know, if you've got the opportunity to drop somebody a message, you finish their book or whatever, great. Just say to them, you know, just drop them a message. I love that. Thanks. You know, it took me 3 days to read, and that was a brilliant 3 days. You know, there are books that I've read on holiday, for example, like Last Days by Adam Neville, for example. I read when I was on a trip with one of my mates to Berlin. We went to Berlin for a week, and every morning I'd wake up early and he'd be more hungover than me. And I'd just wake up and read this book, and the sun was out, and, you know, there was no work, there was no commitments. That book helped to shape that holiday for me. You know, books create memories for people. You know, you're enriching people's lives. So if somebody makes you feel that way, get in touch with them, tell them. And that's where it can start. You know, there's people like Kev Harrison. There's a guy who I'm getting to know online called Austrian Spencer, who is a tireless promoter and champion of other people. You know, there's Paul Feeney, who does a lot for trying to promote other authors, Dave Jeffrey. We can all help each other. You know, it is just a case of being brave. And if you've got an agenda, don't, you know, get to know people for the people that they are. This is what we went back to with the accountability friends. You know, the reason why Luke is there for you and Michael's there for me is because we built those friendships. We didn't go in trying to get anything out of it. You just want to talk to people who are like-minded and think about how they will enrich your life, and likewise how you can kind of give them confidence or give them something in return for your friendship. And that's how it has to be. It's all cyclical. It's just about being a kind, open person and just having a bit of confidence and telling people thanks every now and then. And some of those things will spring up from casual conversations. And, you know, one day you'll bump into them in real life and you'll buy them a pint and send them a message 2 years before will be one of the best decisions you ever made.
I think it's easy to forget, especially when you look at people on the other side of the computer screen or on the other side of the page, that we are all just people. Like, at its fundamental core, like, there's no difference between, and this is obviously like quite grandiose, but it makes a point of like, between us and Stephen King, like, we are people. We have to eat to survive, we have to breathe, we have to shit, we have to piss, we have to do all the basic things that humans do. And obviously it's circumstances that are slightly different. I think that's such a powerful thing to grasp. And one of the things that I'm really enjoying about this conversation is, for me at least, it's like gone to highlight how simple all of this can be. Logistically, on the surface, to do all of this is remarkably simple. You know, find a place, pick a time, sit down in a chair, type some words, put your work out there, message someone if you've enjoyed their book. Like, they're very, very simple instructions. The things that seem to cloud a lot of people is obviously all this expectation, all this wondering, all of the thoughts that run through your own head. I'm sure you've had moments in which, you know, you kind of gotten in your own head about stuff. How do you overcome your mindset to carry on and just to keep moving forward in this business?
it's difficult. I mean, that's, it's not only a kind of writing question, but it's a mental health one as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think I've found a lot of resilience through writing, not just in terms of the self-doubt when you first get started, but everybody has knocks. We have rejections. Been trying to get an agent now for 2 years, almost 2 years to the day. Must have had 140, 150 rejections from agents. Some of them just flat out ignoring your submission. Some of them sending you standard responses. Some of them sending you very tailored things. Some of them taking a full manuscript and then not taking you on. All you've got to worry about is what are you going to do the next time you sit down to write? And if you keep working on that thing, that is your foundation. Right? Everything else that you want to achieve has to be built on that foundation of 1,000 words a day or 1 hour writing a day or whatever your routine is. That's your foundation. No plastic cast, by the way. Just thought I'd point that out.
Hey.
But this is your foundation. Your film deals, your book deals, your sales, your audiobooks, everything else is built on that foundation. You have to keep moving forward like a shark or whatever it is. If it stops moving, it'll die. All those cliches. You have to be there the next day. Do you know what? I've opened my emails, and this is why I don't open them in the morning. I had an agent that had a full manuscript request from me, and I thought, this person, this is the one. They're going to take this. They're going to have this book. I'll be signed. Then we'll ace a publishing deal, and then it'll be film deals. And you're thinking, before you know it, you're half emailing your boss telling him you're going to quit your job before it's even come in. It's easy to get carried away because these are the things that we all want. We all, we want it all. Everybody does, whether they want to admit it or not. We want those things. That's where we want to be. And I'm thinking, this is it. Open my email. I'm due to write. I open my email first thing in the morning. Yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Shit. Well, what's the only thing I can do to fix this situation in my own mind? It's write 1,000 words. You've got to be bloody minded. You've got to be determined. There's no two ways about it. And it can come in different forms. You can find that resilience from probably like I do, bottling up a lot of emotions for months on end while you're writing a novel and then getting physically exhausted by the time it's done. And that's one way of doing it. I can't say I would totally recommend that. But, lean on family and friends, lean on good people that you know and trust. If you need to, it comes Friday and you've had a difficult writing week, have a drink, watch a film, switch off, give yourself the weekend off if you want to write at the weekend. Do what you need to do. Quite often you can listen to your own body or to your own mind, and it will tell you the things that you need. But the one thing you can't ever do is quit, because if you don't turn up and write the next time you're supposed to, be it a Tuesday or a Thursday or Monday morning, whenever it is, if you don't turn up to do those words, none of those other things will ever fix themselves. The only way that agent is ever going to want to take me on in the future is if I write another book and get it to them. That's the only way I'm going to get over that hurdle. It's not sulking about it. And I'm going to quote somebody here who is unpopular. And
is it me?
He's more unpopular than you.
Oh.
Now deceased basketball legend Kobe Bryant. He said this to his daughter. I think she didn't get into a dance recital or something, and she was very upset. And he said, at the end of the day, you can either cry about it or you can be about it. And I think that is very important. It's either you spend your time sulking and moaning and crying, which, don't get me wrong, there are days that I want to bite my keyboard in half through sheer frustration. But at the end of the day, if you're not about what you do, those words won't get done and you won't get anywhere. So you've just got to be able to segment it off. And yeah, there'll be times that my wife will come home from work and I'll hold her very close and she'll know that there's been a rejection or things haven't gone well with the writing, books haven't sold or whatever it may be. But you take your hug, you take your lumps, the next day, I'm there writing again. No matter what's happened, come hell or high water, I'm there. And that's the only way you can ever truly fix these problems.
I love that. One of the biggest lies that I see a lot of people tell themselves is this idea that, first-time writers, they have to write the book and their future success is dependent on this book. And, this kind of goes across both traditional and self-publishing in the sense that likely much more than likely your first book is not going to sell well unless you've got like a lot of steam behind you, a lot of influence, and you can kind of like work a lot of contacts and things. If you're traditional or pursuing traditional, you'll get a lot of rejections. And a lot of people seem to just pin the success of themselves as writers on that first book. And something that I am very aggressively trying to preach at the minute is, you know, you have to improve your craft. You have to keep writing. You have, like all those things that you just said, like take your lumps, keep moving forward, because the only way you can get to that height is to keep practicing. Like, no, I don't, you know, there are incredibly talented writers who are born with something of a flair, but unless it's nurtured, unless you've got the discipline and the skill to continue and just keep practicing and practicing and practicing, that's not going to reach its fruition. And like, again, it comes back to how simple that notion can be, that you just have to write every day to become a writer. And like, it's in conversations like this, and, you know, hundreds of others that I've had on podcasts before, where it's constantly just reaffirmed how simple all of this can be, not mentally, but like just logistically. And writing is a magical thing.
No, you're right. I mean, I'm going to quote another unpopular American now. I don't know if he's.
I will say that I'm a fan of Kobe Bryant.
Yeah, I always respected him. I didn't necessarily always enjoy him as a person. There were aspects of his personality
very
that
intense.
I didn't like. But yeah, so I don't know where people stand on Will Smith, but he comes out, you know, his book and his YouTube show and all that kind of stuff. You know, there is inspiration to be found there. You separate the art from the artist. I'm not, you know, you saw me at Chillicon. I'm not going around slapping the taste out of people. That kind of guy. But one of the things that he kind of said, and I'll paraphrasing, is, you know, if it's you and me on the treadmill, you know, I'll die before I give up. You know, you can keep running alongside me, but I'll die before I step off it. And that's often the way I see a lot of things is, yeah, everybody's got an element of talent, you know, like the old Stephen King thing, talent is like table salt, you know, that's how common it is. But what separates, you know, good writers from other writers is the determination and the grit and the will to keep going. So yeah, you know, there might be person X out there who can write an immaculate 1,000 words and they'll do it once a month. Well, you better believe that my 1,000 words a day might not be as good as theirs, but my novel's getting written quicker and I'm going to edit it better and I'm going to keep working at that thing until it's in the shape that it needs to be in. You better believe that I'll be there every day. So you enjoy your croissants and you enjoy your lunch having a sandwich with your colleagues, but I'm going to be putting the graft in that entire time. And not only have you got to be better than me, you've got to outwork me as well. And I try not to let that happen where I can. I put as much work in as I can. Once the 1,000 words are done, that's great. They're banked for the day. Is the opportunity for a second session in a day? Maybe, maybe not. But if it's there, if the time's there, 20 minutes, let's get it in. Because what else is there? You've just got to keep going. You just got to keep working at it.
Oh, I love it so much. Now, I have 2 more questions before we round off for this interview. The first one is something that I ask my guests every week, and the second one is a question carried over from last week's guest. It's a bit of a surprise. So the first question is, and I believe part of this has been answered, but also if you can get like a more formal stance on it, is why do you, Dan Howarth, write?
Quite simply, to leave something behind, I think. So going back to the parental issue, it is something that has really powered me. And I was always one of these people that I was like, you know, when I have a kid, I'm not going to be that guy who talks about his kid all the time. And I don't think directly I have talked about my kid quite a lot in this interview, but indirectly, I guess I have, because I've talked about being a parent quite a lot. And that has powered me. And it's given me almost a perspective where you think, what do we leave for other people in a way? So what do we leave behind? How do we tell stories? How do we leave our mark on the world? Now, as I've mentioned before, like my granddad was a great storyteller. He'd sit down, he'd tell you ghost stories, he'd tell you horrific stuff that happened in the Second World War to him, all this kind of stuff. But those stories were what he left behind. He left them behind for me. They're in my memories. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any of those written down. We don't have any of them recorded. All we have as a family is our memories of him. And that is something that's lived with me. I think subconsciously, if I was to really be analytical about it, that's probably one of the main things that pushed me to write. Now, I look at my daughter and think, what am I going to leave behind for her? Well, I can tell you now, if you ever watch this, Elsie, sorry, but it's not going to be a lot of money. So what you are getting is hopefully some great memories that we'll create together, but also these things that you can look through when I'm gone, of books that I've written, things that I've made, things that I've produced, to leave a legacy, and you can help to remember and understand what kind of person I was. And I think that legacy aspect is a big part of what drives me.
I think that's also the first time that I've realized that my grandchildren and my great grandchildren, should I have them, might actually be watching one of these at one point.
Yeah.
It's
On
kind
some
of
sort of chip implanted in their brain in the
yeah.
future or something. Yeah. I'll just download Grandad Dan.
Yeah.
There you go.
Just sit back on your chair, just eyes flickering.
Okay, so the final question I have for you, as I say, pass over from last week's guest. The question is, which one book have you gifted the most to others, and why?
Okay, I can answer that quite comfortably, actually. Yeah. So in the last 2 years, well, since it came out, so I think it came out in last year or the year before, I've gifted 3 copies of True Crime Story by Joseph Knox to various family members. The reason for that is I love epistolary fiction. So this is a crime story that is told. A girl goes missing, Manchester-based student. She goes missing and is never found. The story is told through oral history, like interviews with her close family and friends. And you try to piece together as the reader, with the help of the author, who is a character within the book, to piece together what happened to Zoe Nolan and how she went missing. Now, for me, I think that's really interesting and an original take to tell. Again, a very dark story, a crime story, but it reads unlike any other novel that I've ever read. So it came out and I immediately bought it for family and friends' birthdays. So I gave 3 copies away of that last year. Although I suppose it's probably trumped by the fact that I went to Chillicon and gave away a load of copies of my own books.
Yeah.
But that's a really narcissistic.
That's my own.
So.
Yeah. No, I love that answer. I'm going to have to check that one out. What was the title again for me?
True Crime Story by Joseph Knox. And if you have Audible, it is one of the greatest audiobooks I've listened to. It's really high quality acting and production from a wide cast as well. So definitely get on that if you can.
Beautiful. Making show notes. Well, Dan, we're at the end of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me and for sharing your time and your wisdom.
Yeah, my relative wisdom. I think I should just leave it with a note is I've probably come across as really quite intense here. I do like a bit of a giggle as well. So just, if you follow me on Twitter or whatever, send me jokes, please. I will appreciate them. Sometimes I need a break from all this grinding away. Dad jokes are appreciated as well.
Yeah. And where can people follow you? What are your links?
So I'm on Twitter mostly. That's my main social media drug. So at Dan Howarth 20, that's 20, or via my website, danhowarthwriter.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you one more time. And yeah, get cracking. Back to the keyboard.
Yeah, you know it.
So, Sam, what did you make of that?
What I made of that is that I have to stop starting each one of these with "I love them."
Uh-huh.
I just realised that's just how I start. I really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm.
I found him, first of all, very northern, which always makes me happy.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell a lot about a person if they're northern, and it is that they're better.
I think we've had this on this podcast before,
Yeah,
and I'm just going to slide past us.
Yeah. But no, like, there was so much that I found really kind of inspiring, actually, about that. And kind of the main takeaway for me, and it's kind of strange because it's quite timely from what I was talking about before, is him talking about that foundation. That, like, you don't get all of the other stuff. You don't get the bells and the whistles and all the trimmings and all of the rest of it unless you have that foundation. And I just love this idea of no matter what, you return to the work.
Luke mentioned it last week, the beam.
Yeah.
Or the week before.
You keep coming back and doing the work, because nothing will happen unless you do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And it's I mean, the theme of like simplicity kind of ran through, you know, you were talking about how logistically it's a very simple idea. You sit down,
Mm-hmm.
like if you're an author, you sit down every day. Well, not necessarily every day, but you sit down on the days that, you know, you have set out for yourself to do it, and you do the typing
Mm-hmm.
for the allotted amount of time or words, however you work, and then you come back the next day and you do it again.
It's thrilling.
Like it sounds incredibly simple, and like you say,
Yeah.
logistically it is. Obviously, you know, nothing happens in a vacuum, and we all have our own struggles and everything, but it is that simple logistically. And you know, things get twisted so easily.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also that thing of, like you said before, you know, we know these things, they are simple, but somehow we manage to convince ourselves that there's an easier way, and we spend so much time trying to find the shortcut.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
we spend so much time,
Mm-hmm.
like say the journey is 10 miles, we run around for like 7,000 miles to find the shortcut.
Yeah.
And it's like, so yeah, I thought it was a really nice kind of reminder of that it's not about being the fanciest or, you know, the most polished or the whatever. It's just about being the person that shows up for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And how you have to continue to show up for yourself to get anywhere, for anyone to want to show up for you, and how you will be showing up for yourself long before anybody cares. Yeah. So no, I really enjoyed it, and I also enjoyed the fact that there is a special place in hell for people that put meetings over lunch hour.
Yeah. It's not wrong. Who does that? Who's like, I don't care about my lunch, so no one else should. Like, piss off, Sandrine.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like it's, I mean, you said it there, we said it in the interview, like so much of this is simplistic, so much of this is given to you for free.
Mm-hmm.
Like the actual process itself, how you write a book, you sit down and you write a book. Like that's not being a dick, that's not like a fancy way of saying it. Like obviously you have to take into account craft, you have to take into account time and practice and intentional learning, all that kind of stuff. But the actual origins of writing a book start on sitting down at a keyboard and you write, and your first book is shockingly shit. Some people like Tim Leben last week come to it very, very early, and they realize that they love the process, and they're, you know, fortunate enough that by the time they started putting their work out, they put in active hours enough to have leveled up their craft to a position in which it's dished out. In conversation with Josh Mallowan on the Great Writer Share podcast, he had something like 13, 14, it might be more than that, like finished manuscripts.
Yes.
I think it was close to 30 actually.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, that once he had the manuscripts, he loved to write, he then optioned them out and tried to get them to do something.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my own journey, so I started really hardcore into this business, I guess in 2015, and I've seen people that come with the dollar signs in their eyes, but without the fire in their heart. And they don't last unless they get very lucky and one of their books hits it out of the park. And then weirdly enough, that money is fueling their satisfaction and they're doing the thing for the purpose that they've gone for. But a lot of people, and the ones that I've seen the most of, are friends of mine who I've seen since the very beginning, who have just stuck at it because they loved it. And they've not, failure is the wrong word, they've not been as successful as they'd liked in the beginning, because really on this path, we've learned that no one really is, like the odds aren't in your favor. But they've stuck with it and they've grown and they've grown. And like 5, 6, 7 years later, I've now seen, you know, the fruits bear for quite a lot of writers who did stick with it. And I've also seen hundreds more disappear forever. Like I talk a lot on this and in the community about sustainability, because if you're not writing because you're passionate, if you're not writing because you're passionate about it, then what are you doing it for? And if it's for money, there is a place for you. It's just very, very hard, because I personally would not want to spend hours and hours grafting and crawling away at something that I did not enjoy just for the money, because there are thousands of options. Like,
Yeah,
that you
like
could- yeah,
your chances are higher of becoming a barrister and a lawyer and
Yeah,
making very good
go
money
into the
doing that
private
way.
sector.
Yeah.
Like,
It really is. And he says it there and there, like he puts himself in that community because he's part of the community, and he reaches out to people because he has a shared love of horror. And if you love someone's work, don't be shy of telling them that you appreciate
I
their
love
work.
that.
Yeah, I think that's gorgeous. And again, like quite a few of my relationships with authors have started that way. Like I mentioned in the interview, Julie, my friendship with Zach Bohannon started because I reached out to him after reading Empty Bodies. Same with Jay Thorne, same with like so many different people. Hello.
I'm pointing at myself.
Hello.
Like, wow. I mean, I was getting at like that's how we started working together because that's whatever.
It is. It is. Like you were. I didn't know which way that was going, but yeah, like you're a fan of my work.
Yeah,
and
so it's okay. I'm no about Helen's fine, carry on.
But also, like books are the CV for a writer. Like if like it kind of says a lot about who you are, and yeah, just it can be quite intimidating dropping an email and being like, I loved your work, but my God, like, does it go far? And even if it's like, do it without expectation. Don't expect someone to write back and be like, oh, thank you. It's so amazing to hear from you. Because some people are just genuinely busy. Like I wouldn't imagine that if I dropped Stephen King an email that he'd sort of send this massive essay back on like how thankful he is. But like, I can imagine he doesn't tire of people going like, I love your work.
Yeah. Oh, so boring.
Ugh, this
Stop
again.
telling me how great I am, guys.
I already know. But yeah, I think Dan's a very intelligent guy. He's a very committed guy. He's a very passionate guy, and he's someone that definitely inspires me. And like I said in the interview, seeing him go around the Chilicon room and sort of just talking to people, he is really integrated with that community, and people know him, people love him, people respect him, and it's because he's a nice guy and he genuinely does it without wanting reward. Yeah, like he does it because he's just passionate about it. And that really was kind of like the whole tone of that weekend for me. But that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, Dan's a great guy, and I definitely recommend checking out his books.
Nice.
So,
Well, hey, I got a question for you. Who we got next week?
Next week we have.
Although maybe we should. Do you want to just touch on the fact that like this week wasn't Meg?
Holy shit! Yeah. So
I just realised.
Yeah, scheduling conflict. Sorry for people expecting Meg Jolly. But yeah, we had Dan Howarth, and we will be getting Meg back in a different capacity at some point soon. But yeah, apologies for that. Next week we have a very, very familiar face, at least to myself and to people that know the stuff that I do. Sasha motherfucking Black is joining us on the podcast. So that's going to be a fun one. We used to run the Next Level Authors podcast together. We go back a ways through like all the different indie community spaces. And I can imagine it's going to be some form of chaos. But I know that Sasha has grown a lot and learned a lot over the last few months since the end of the Next Level Authors podcast. So we'll have a lot there to dive into and to cover. So look forward to that.
Nice. Oh, you also single-handedly pulled each other through pandemic.
I mean, yeah, there was that as well. It'll be a fun conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, without further ado, apologies. It has been quite a long week, people. I'm not entirely on my game right now.
Yeah.
A massive thank you to you, the listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate you and the time you choose to spend with us every week. As always, if you're looking to level up your writing, activate your author career, get your 30 days free in the community over at activatedauthors.com and find out all about our community, our resources, and everything else we've got going on. One more time.
Smooth.
Oh, I know. Just rocked it.
Yeah.
One more time from myself and from Sam. We will see you next week.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Activate your energy.